Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Boardroom. If you are joining us live, welcome. We would love to have you as part of the conversation. So please do add any questions or comments that you have for today's interviewees, and we will try to pass them on. If you don't manage to catch us live, no problem at all. This will be streamed back on who'swho.mt, Malta's leading business portal. Today, we're going to be talking about a critical topic for our economy, for the future of the planet, and that is the green economy. How do we develop it? How do we make the most of it? Are we doing enough? What could we be doing more? And to help me with that discussion, we have three fantastic experts on the topic. We have Vanya Veras, who's Managing Director at Vivacity Ltd. She's also a European expert in waste management. We have Dr. Antoine Zammit. He's a senior lecturer at the Faculty for the Built Environment at the University of Malta, and he's the founder and director of Studjurban. And we have Dr. Marie Briguglio, who is, of course, a leading economist. Just a note that Marie is very kindly joining us from overseas today for this conversation. Possible technical difficulties in our future, but maybe not. And we're very excited to have you as part of the conversation, Marie. Thank you for making the effort to be here. So to get us started in the conversation today, Vanya, I'll come to you first, just for a bit of an explanation about what the green economy even is.
Okay, well, firstly, I'll start with the fact that we are currently in a linear economy. And that means we take resources, produce, consume, throw away. So we have, in all of our lifetimes, got very used to this throwaway economy. I buy a computer, 3 years later it's broken, I throw it away. And I don't really think about what's going to happen to it afterwards and all the heavy metals or pollutants that are inside it, or even the potential to create a new computer with the old one. That's a linear economy. A circular economy is part of the green economy, and that is where we don't lose resources. So we don't always go to mining, we mine from our waste to create new products and try ever more to have a production cycle which creates less and less and less waste. So that's one part of the green economy. Another part is the green or the bioeconomy, the circular bioeconomy, where we take plant matter resources, soil, and all of those natural cycles and keep them going. So if we have food waste, we compost it, put it back to the land, increase the absorption of the soil, increase the biodiversity of the soil and the plants above the soil, and obviously the insects and the animals, and that keeps that going. And these two are the basis of a green economy. And businesses which follow those ethics, those principles, will be fit for this new green economy.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a great introduction to set us in the right mindset for today's discussion. Antoine, I'll come to you now. Could you possibly give us any examples of this in practice, whether local or international, that you can think of?
Well, I think the most obvious examples are the ones where the inputs, as Vanya excellently explained, where the inputs are trying to be reduced in this, new circular metabolism, in a sense, that then in turn also reduces the outputs. So obviously, passive energy is one very obvious way of doing that, right? Where you try to reduce the reliance on unsustainable means of energy production. It's about, of course, trying to decentralize that as much as possible. So today we try to incentivize, up to the individual level. So even the individual business or the individual homeowner generating their own energy. So trying to be less reliant on the grid. So I would say that that is probably one of the more obvious ones. I think, and probably this is something we will come to later, this is also interesting to understand, even in the sense of where, let's say, financial incentives are going. And I think here we need to have a bit of a rethink. But certainly, that is probably the easiest way to achieve it. My problem with that is that in most cases, when you have this more passive energy production, you tend to forget that you should still be sustainable in the way that you are living or in the way you are producing. And therefore, I always go with the 3 R's principle, that we first need to try and reduce. And therefore, we need to also try to reduce, let's say, the need to cool or to heat our buildings, right? And in that way, then we, of course, the energy that we can produce can go for other means, rather than trying to offset, the extra energy that we need to leave our ACs on all the time, which is, then self-defeating.
Okay. Thank you, Antoine. And Marie, I'll come to you now to talk specifically about the economic side of things. Where are we going with the green economy? Is this a viable option to be thinking in this way, or is it just not something that as humans we could even think about achieving?
Well, I mean, one thing that I like to say when asked about or when asked this question is that what's absolutely not viable is to continue with an economy of the nature that ours is. It's absolutely not sustainable in the future to continue to have an economy which relies on resource extraction and then which relies on production, which creates a lot of side effects, which include pollution into various media, pollution into the air, pollution into groundwater, pollution into the sea, and which subsequently, upon consumption of the very same products or services that we've generated, we create even more waste and byproducts. And very often, or to date, many of these side effects have been far away. We've kind of generously exported our side effects to other countries, but we've slowly come to realize that the world is actually a very small place. And no matter how much we think that climate change is someone else's problem, it starts to become our problem. No matter how much we think that disposal of plastics is going somewhere far away where we won't see it, it's come back to haunt us. No matter how much we think that, transportation, the modern thing is to go around with private combustion vehicles, that's come back to haunt us too, because our own air quality is contaminated. What's simply not viable is to continue this trajectory. Back in the 70s, someone likened our economic model to being in a spaceship and being negligent of the fact that whatever you throw in a spaceship, because it's a closed system, will basically come back to hit you in the face, right? And the analogy was that we're in spaceship Earth. It's taken some time, but we have realized now that whatever we've thrown has come back to haunt us. And it's completely impossible to continue to throw in this way. Therefore, by default, the green economy, that is an economy which tries to reduce extraction, reduce emissions, and reduce leftover waste, is the only way to go. And then the question becomes, how fast are we going to get there? How painfully? And how much irreversible damage are we going to do before we actually do it?
Okay. Thank you, Marie. And Vanya, coming to you now, obviously when we think of the economy, the green economy, we think of protecting the environment. And if you had to sort of take a look at Malta at the moment, obviously Malta being our economy, how do you feel we're doing when it comes to protecting and moving forward this green idea?
That's a big question. It's one I studied. I studied for just by myself for quite a few months when I first arrived, because Malta is an opportunity. It's an exceptional case of an economy of high GDP, small population and small size. So it could very easily be an example for all. That is to say that planning, which there is a lack of, and execution to follow that planning in a certain time frame which would be planned, would get us to, I believe, carbon neutrality in 10 years. But without the planning and the execution within that time frame, it's not going to happen. Specifically, if I take just 2 points, waste management, when I arrived here 4 years ago, after a long time away, there was already talk of a new waste management plan and implementation. Then the following year, there was a catastrophe. The existing plants were burnt down, and discussions of reinvestment have only just begun. Now, without investments in proper waste management, we cannot recover, for example, the food waste. And in southern countries such as Malta, our food waste is about 50% of the total municipal waste generated. That is about 250,000 tons per year. So we generate, as Maltese citizens, over 500 kilos of waste per person per year, not per household, per person. That is among the highest generation in Europe. So having a composting plant and having that compost for agriculture, for putting on land simply to increase its absorption power for floodwaters will reduce flooding, reduce damage, and of course you have it available for gardening rather than using what is imported today, which is peat. Now, if you look at that as an environmental footprint, it's enormous, not taking advantage of the food waste that we generate on this island. Because peat has a huge environmental footprint by itself, and we're digging it up and we're shipping it to Malta in plastic. So that's one area that I believe needs to be improved and fast. The other area is the whole urban setting. So Antoine mentioned it earlier, and that is subsidies for solar energy. I would take that as subsidies for both renewable energy and for reducing energy consumption in buildings. We need to have a national outlook and a national goal. So by when are we going to have reduced the energy consumption for heating and cooling by, say, 50% in Maltese housing and all buildings? We have a target date anyway to achieve. That's 2030. That's the European law. And the other question that needs to be examined nationally is what is our target for renewable energy? And from that target, we can set a subsidy and then follow through with that investment with a lot of awareness raising, because there is lack of understanding in the public of not only of the subsidies and how to get them, but how they roll out and when they end, and what that means in terms of having amortized your investment and what profit you will make after that. There's a lot of confusion around that. So those are that's my feedback on your question.
Certainly, thank you. And Antoine, sort of following up on that, obviously you come to this primarily from a built environment architecture perspective in your expertise. And we've heard a little bit from Vanya there about sort of the waste management side, the solar side. What about the built environment? What are we not doing at this point?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, obviously it starts from the strategic level, right? It starts from the macro level up, then goes down to the individual micro level, the individual building level. And on all levels, I mean, of course, I think we haven't reached any objectives yet. The truth, as Vanya said, is there has been, in general, right, a lack of planning. I mean, I would even call it reactive planning, right? So we always react to a situation. We don't plan ahead. There is no plan, no 10-year plan. Where do we want to arrive in terms of future growth for our country? Okay, so where do we plan new growth areas? How do we ensure that we have the correct infrastructure in terms of services, in terms of transportation? To, of course, continue reducing the reliance on the private car, which, as we know, is immense. So, how do we marry for me, it's always these three key pillars. It's about density, it's about land use, it's about mix. The three of them work together. In fact, Kim Davey, a very famous Australian urban designer, has called it the urban DMA, right? Where you need to understand that density is actually a good thing, but density not if it becomes overcrowding, and density not if it becomes a single-use, car-dependent type of environment. which is what we are creating. We are redeveloping two-story houses into apartment blocks without the correct mix, with a continuous reliance on private vehicles, with lack of adequate strategies and management in terms of parking and alternative means of transportation. And of course, then we suffer from it. And then we associate density almost to something being very negative, when actually we can exploit, as Vanya correctly said, we have a gem of an opportunity. We can actually exploit the fact that we are the densest country in Europe. We should actually celebrate that and, have a sustainable mode of infrastructure and transportation, where we also then encourage further walkability. I mean, we are currently working as an office on a number of strategies for a number of local councils. Maybe you've heard of it recently. We've launched this slow streets concept, where we are going to try and pilot, some areas within each locality which are more walkable. And it's, for me, it becomes, always this question of the carrot and the stick, right? So of course you need to incentivize, but then ultimately, at one point you just need to say, listen, we need to take clear decisions, right? And decisions which are going to hurt some people. That is, that's the way it is. But sometimes we shy away from this, and I think we've done it too many times. So I applaud everything Vanya said. I would add to it, however, that it ultimately also boils down to proper urban governance. And I think governance becomes that critical aspect, which unfortunately we lack. Okay, in terms of inclusivity, in terms of really understanding the different sectors, be them private individuals and businesses and the NGOs and the different interests, obviously, which are obviously there, and trying to bring them together and trying to plan a roadmap which then has clear, achievable targets. Okay, not targets. Because if you just say, we need to achieve this in 10 years' time, the tendency is that many might say, I probably won't even be here in 10 years' time, so I don't even bother about it. No, you need to have the long-term vision, but you have to have a number of short-term achievable visions, where you then marry the financial incentives in order to try and get to a final scenario. You just have to be careful that, by taking then short-term and medium-term decisions, you are not compromising the longer-term decisions. Okay, so eventually we need to have sustainable transport that has to be commonplace. Okay, but at the same time we're widening our roads and we're building our infrastructure. Okay, maybe I can accept that we build the arterial road infrastructure and shift our cars onto there, but definitely we shouldn't be widening our local roads. Definitely we shouldn't be encouraging more cars, to try and rat race through a locality. We need to, so we have to make sure that we're not taking short-term decisions today, which are going to compromise future ones. And obviously transportation is quite key to this. And then especially in the new discussion of now being able to telework, this, I think, starts getting another interesting dimension.
Absolutely.
I was going to jump in a little bit, Joe, and talk a little bit about this incentives, subsidies, help, and so forth. So far in the history of environmental governance in Malta, there's been a lot of throwing money at the problem. And we throw money at the problem in two ways. We get government to invest, typically in urgent infrastructure, when we're back to the wall and have no other option but to resolve the problem because subsequent governments would have left it too late. And the second way we throw money at the problem is by creating lollipops at budget time. So here's this subsidy, here's this other subsidy, come to this. That's not enough. The governance toolkit has a lot more powerful tools than government spending people's taxes and government waiving subsidies. In a mature governance of the environmental kind, to get us to a green economy, we'd be using all the artillery that we have. That includes, first and foremost, enforcement of environmental laws with penalties. Hello, that would actually raise revenues. That also includes taxing. How many times have we heard the polluter pays principle? We have nothing of the sort. What we actually have is the victim pays principle and the polluter is supported principle. So no amount of throwing money to subsidize the right behavior is ever going to overcome the fact that we're also throwing money at polluting behavior. We are simultaneously facilitating pollution, even as we wave the green flag of facilitating pro-environmental, minuscule, and often token actions. The governance toolkit has in it, imagine you're driving a car. You've got the accelerator, you've got the brake, you've got the clutch, you've got the steering wheel. It's almost as though we're trying to drive a car with the accelerator alone and forgetting that we have a brake pedal, forgetting that we have a steering wheel, we've got a shift stick. All of these tools are shelved. Sooner rather than later, we're going to have to employ them in a big hurry. What happens when we have to act in a hurry? We lose the potential to use fine tools like taxes, deposit refund schemes, tradable permits. These are sophisticated tools that are used in most developed countries. And instead, we'll be left with the only intervention, which is outright bans. Outright bans and lots of government expenditure, the costliest of options. So when people who are in my field, environmental economists, are advocating early action, we're advocating that because it costs less. It costs less to government, it's less punitive on business, and it's less punitive on households in terms of taxation. Unfortunately, what is economically efficient and expedient is not always politically so. The political term, at its best, is 5 years, gradually and very fast, depleting to 1 year, then it's election time, and then all these long-term things go out of the window, and it's only tokenism. So what we're dealing with here is not economy versus environment. That has long not been an issue among economists, at least. The environment is a resource. It's a source of quality of life. It's our source of productivity. It's even a factor of production. There's no dispute that the environment is a great part of the economy. But what we have to really grapple with is the politics of it and the desire to bite the bullet and make short-term decisions, which, as Antoine says, have benefits in the long term.
Can I jump in here and just say that since the 10th of December last year, so since the publication of the European Green Deal, it's the first time ever at European level that environment has been top priority. And as Marie very rightly said, this is not a case of throwing money at the problem. It's a case of using funds which have been very carefully designed through the European Green Deal and the circular economy, and also other legislation on sustainable finance, to help the transition towards a green economy. So if we look at what happened to us, the shock that happened to us in COVID, when everything had to shut down, we had to stay at home, and many businesses which are client reliant and presence of client reliant had to close. We had, first of all, the shock realization that our air is polluted by us every day and accumulates every day. And the minute we stop, a month later, it's clean and we don't have the problem of asthma, or it's starting to go away. And the purpose of this transition funding is to bring everyone along. So to help existing businesses, which may be using, to take a simple example, single-use packaging, or transport, small, short-distance transport companies, delivery companies, which are using old diesel-powered vans, to transition to even leasing electric-powered vans. All of these things are to help existing businesses to survive, but in a new green economy. There's no point telling a business or a private person who owns a car that they have to scrap their car today and buy a new electric vehicle. It has to be a facilitated transition over a period of time. And I think that a 5-year timeline can achieve a lot. These are not long-time, these are not achievements that have to be achieved over a long time period. They can be split into sections. So you have a long-term goal, which is 10 years, and you split it into 1 year or 2 year sections or 3 year sections. And every time you reach a section, you check, did I reach my goal? And this is something which I lobbied really hard on the implementation of the Waste Framework Directive, which started, I don't know, about 7-8 years ago now, because it was published finally in the middle of 2018, so probably longer than that. We started in 2012. But if you look at the rate of implementation and the way this directive is implemented in the Western and the Northern countries of the EU, and the way it's not implemented in the South, you'll recognize that basically what's missing is governance. You don't have governance. So there's no long-term planning, there's no overview, and there's no inclusiveness. This goes for all environmental legislation, because it has to be inclusive. You have to include the local, the regional, and the national level. And it has to be, of course, for a circular economy, inclusive of business. So what I did was, European practice is we set a new target, which is 5 years away or 10 years away. And after 5 years, we revise, put the target up, and that's our new goal. And if the countries don't reach it by the target date, then we spend the next 5 years taking them to court, and after that, we might fine them. That's not effective.
No.
So I got them to include an early warning system. So every 3 years, they check. Well, actually, it's every 2 years now. They have, they go around every member state and they check, what have you done towards the targets? It's not a penalty, it's not a stick, it's not a you naughty country, you haven't done it. It's where have you got to, where were your barriers, and how can we overcome them? And we need to do that at national level for everything to do with energy, transport, housing and energy consumption within the housing. Energy consumption in the summer goes sky high. It hits everybody's pockets. But then there are other areas that I would apply it to as well, which are really good job creators. And that's repair and reuse. So we throw in every member state a lot of furniture out, what we call bulky waste. So that's white goods, brown goods, and anything to do with furniture. Most of this is really high quality old wooden furniture, which has, if it's looked at as an antique, it has a very high value. But we're either throwing it in a landfill or in an incinerator today, most of it. And this is also a lot of textiles. So collecting them as non-waste and putting them in a repair center, training people who otherwise might not have the possibility of having a job because they're unskilled or very low skilled. This creates a new economy. So there are many different ways of using the resources that we have, and prevention of waste, prevention of use of energy, prevention of pollution, whether it's from polluting cars today or general circulation. So that's basically what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Antoine, I'm going to come to you now. I mean, what are the benefits of going down this route? I mean, we've been talking about it for such a long time. It feels like we have been talking about becoming more environmentally friendly and recycling and all of this stuff. I mean, we've certainly been talking about it since I was at school, but it doesn't necessarily feel like we've made a lot of progress. is this achievable? Is it something that we are ever going to be able to do? Are there good examples that are doing it, that are achieving the circular economy and, you know, waving the flag that we can look towards for inspiration to think, okay, it's worth it, we need to do it? Or are we really just, you know, getting to the point where this is going to be a guaranteed fail?
Yeah, I mean, I am a firm believer that ultimately, you know, everything we do, really and truly, right? It's ability. Now, these are very big words, which are very hard to translate in a, you know, in a day-to-day, on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's very important to try and, you know, translate these terms in more manageable manners. I mean, as I said, if it's just a question of saying, oh, you know, this is something that you'll see the benefits, you know, in 10, 15 years time, then, you know, you're not going to sell it, because many people are going to tell you, yeah, but I mean, the initial cost to invest is, you know, doesn't make it worth it. You know, I don't really care about, you know, that long-term saving, that long-term benefit. So, you know, it cannot be simply about that, right? It can be, however, about, so on an individual level, because I think you need to work in parallel on an individual level, you know, at grassroots level, and you have to work in parallel, you know, with the big players, with the stakeholders, with the polluters, and so forth, right? You have to work on both levels. So at the individual level, it's about trying to make people experience the improvement in quality of life. As Vanya said, you know, COVID was a lesson for everyone. I think today there is a bit of a better appreciation of the open spaces that we need, of the air quality that we previously lacked, okay, of the importance of even, you know, meeting other people and socializing, okay? So we are things that we maybe took for granted, okay? And things that we thought were maybe difficult to achieve, we actually managed, or we are coping, okay? We're adapting. Ultimately, I think one of our biggest assets as human beings is the ability to adapt. And this, you know, history proves this time and time again.
And we saw it during COVID. I mean, we can do it when we're forced to do it.
Absolutely.
Of adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are resilient, you know, and I mean, this is to be used to our advantage. But then there is also, you know, the higher level, okay? I mean, you look at countries, I mean, I always look towards Portugal, for example. I see Portugal as a really great example of a country that, in spite even of its, you know, economic issues, has still continued to invest in its green spaces. It has a fantastic green strategy. I mean, today you have a situation where, because of this green strategy, okay, people are leaving other countries, high worth net individuals, like we like to call them here in Malta, okay, the millionaires and the billionaires are actually leaving this country, this island of ours, and moving there, you know, because it is actually better quality of life. So investing in the environment, I mean, as Marie said, of course, today there is no question about it, but the truth is also, and emphasizing this even more, is that investing in the environment means that you're drawing the human capital, okay? And therefore you're drawing the brains, you're drawing the people who are then going to contribute socially and even more economically to your city or to your country. And therefore, you know, reversing the, of course, traditional model, which unfortunately here we still seem to focus on, okay, that's we focus on the economic pillar, and then maybe we still keep the social pillar, so that, you know, the welfare state still remains there and we're still politically acceptable, but of course the environment can be the one that suffers. And I think this, you know, cities are showing us that this can and should be reversed. So I think, you know, as I said, it's about working at different levels. It's important that one learns to speak the right language as well, okay, in order to, I guess ultimately you also have an element of convincing to do. I mean, I see it in my day-to-day sometimes as a practitioner. You know, I deal with developers, and more often than not, I am there arguing that it's better to have, you know, 20 units in a block than having 30 grand units. Of course, they don't understand that, because for them it's about fitting in the numbers, because it's the numbers which are going to sell. So therefore, what do? Of course, I have my architectural intent, but I sell it in terms of numbers, because, you know, 20 units at, you know, a great rate per square meter will still yield you more profit than 30 units at a lower rate per square meter. And today we know You go around, you see the market that we have, you see the abysmal, units that are being built with lack of ventilation, with lack of light, lack of external space. Today, people are appreciating that need even more, right? So sometimes it's about saying, this is where I want to achieve, but I need to sell it in a way, okay, maybe in using a different language. Because ultimately, you also need to appreciate that, let's say a developer is interested in, of course, maximizing the profits as much as possible. So therefore, speak that language, but it makes sense from that language as well. Okay, so I think this is something very important, and I don't think that sometimes we tend to do it. I mean, it's always a bit difficult. I mean, if you're talking, let's say, more theoretically and academically, you're always talking to the same group of people, and therefore you don't reach another group. But then you reach the other group, but you're losing the more important theoretical basis of it. So you need to find, and that's why it goes back down to governance at the end of the day, because then it also goes back down to really, the key stakeholders who really need to be there to push it.
And in fact, we've had a question from one of our viewers. Adrian has written in, and Marie, I'm going to come to you with this question. And he's asking, it's all about convincing the influential stakeholders. I think many people now on the ground, we understand, we want, in parts of the world, we're even on the streets fighting for better, a better future, better environment. How do we make the people making the rules understand that this is what we need and want?
Well, so I've thought, I've been working in environmental issues since I was 20. So that's 3 decades of thinking this question: how do we get this change? How do we get it? And ultimately, I've come to the realization that the buck stops with the political stakeholders. The consumers want it, families want it, parents want it, producers don't want to waste money, suppliers and businesses, they're astute, If they see an opportunity, they're going to go for it. They're not damaging the environment willfully. There isn't a class of evil business people who are willfully making money by polluting. They're polluting as a byproduct of what they're doing. What's missing is the regulation to make them want to do it differently. Some business people have even outrun government and are already moving towards the first mover advantage. Again, policymakers are not even where the buck stops. We've got a beautiful draft environmental policy out for consultation now, courtesy of ERA. It's just come out. There's plenty of instruments out for consultation. The legislation is even there. We've got the same body of legislation as all European Union countries. We couldn't have it otherwise. It was mandatory that we had to transpose this legislation. So if the legislation is there, if the policymakers are well trained and they know what they're doing, if the households want it, if businesses will adapt, then why isn't it happening?
Yeah.
And the missing link is the political will to do it. And if there's, this has been brought to light, especially in the climate movement, where the focus is almost completely on the political class. If you see what's happening, Greta Thunberg is not trying to convince people to switch off the lights. It's way past that. She's not trying to convince people to switch, energy type. She's going straight at the political class. And I think it's about time that we understood that that's where the buck has stopped. Europe seems to have understood that with the Green Deal. So therefore, to Adrian de Battista's question, that the next step is working on ways of convincing influential stakeholders, I say yes, I'm completely with you. And those stakeholders are not even business, they're not even households, they're not the church in Malta, even the church is convinced. Really, at this stage, our next door to knock on is to make sure we've got a class of politicians on either side of the room that really wants to leave this legacy. I'm feeling hopeful in this respect. I have to say, it's not all negative. I sense that there is a sudden surge of goodwill. Hopefully, it's seen through.
Yeah, and if I may add, I mean, ultimately, if the people want it, if the people really want it, then, politician is also bound to listen, right? And therefore, if there is enough pressure to politicians to really do it, and if politicians can really bite the bullet and even lead by example. I mean, we have, 500 social housing units being designed. I mean, apart from the whole, whether we agree with social housing still or not, like, to have these enclaves, but at the very least, make them zero energy buildings. I mean, you have such an opportunity, right? So you really need to also lead by example. I mean, that would be my message to central government.
You're giving grants out. You give out grants for COVID. You give assistance. Green it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Make it worth double if you go to an outlet that has conformed or that has no illegalities. At the very least, it's not abusive. So there's a lot that government can do. And another piece of good news, Joe, is that, we're not the first ones to try this. Rather, the fact that we've left it a little bit late means that there's plenty of good practice for us to learn from.
Yeah.
So we're not exactly, forging a path here. And that means that we can learn from good practice.
Yeah,
certainly. I will now, as we sort of, I mean, I could talk about this all day, certainly. And I think from our conversation, we would definitely love to have this conversation again, because there's so much that we can talk about. But I think if we could, if we just wrap up today's conversation, I'll come to you each in turn for perhaps your one thing to our viewers to talk about opportunity. What would you say is the clearest opportunity that we could have as business people, as business leaders, of shifting our mindset into the circular and green economy? And Marie, I'll come to you first.
Okay, well, I think that, the writing is on the wall. That's where we're heading. That's where, that's where the trajectory is. So the faster you get there, the less pain that you endure by planning your way there, capitalizing on not just the consumer demand, but also on making your own way to where laws will eventually take you. And that, I think, is a major business case to be made. Not to do it in a hurry, no panic, but do it. Plan the long term and plan the short term to get there.
Thank you, Marie. Great advice. Antoine, I'll come to you next.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is, businesses can really invest in a lot of greening initiatives, especially if they have, for instance, the possibility of green roofs. Vanya will endorse me on this for sure, and more sustainable external fabric and so forth. But also, I think there is this opportunity to rethink the way that transportation and mobility can be done more effectively, whether it is in terms of trying to organize, more carpooling opportunities, for example, or else even, which is something we didn't really talk about, but this could be also a very good opportunity, is the way that we rethink freight, the way we rethink logistics, trying to, again, have, peripheral areas which then supply with limited amount of vehicles, rather than having, each and every grocer on this island that receives 6 or 7 vehicles on a daily basis, which just doesn't make sense, right? So I would say the transportation for me remains always a very critical issue.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Antoine. And finally, Vanya, your thoughts, please.
So I would endorse what Marie said about having leadership from the political side, but also I think that we do need more leadership from the business side. There are some businesses like Antoine's, which are front runners and look at the big picture of resources and resource use and the opportunities and tools we have on the market. But there are a lot of businesses which are stuck between doing business as usual, knowing that they have to change, and being afraid of that change because they have lack of knowledge. Now, in a public sense, or for the public operators, the EU has a tool for knowledge sharing, and I use that for waste management, but it is available for all areas of environment and environmental improvements, linked with environmental legislation, which we all have to implement as EU. From a business sense, I would suggest that there is something set up for chambers of commerce to link up country to country and share knowledge. This could be knowledge on packaging use, it could be knowledge on freight, it could be knowledge as in shipping from one country to another rather than just having a centralized unit. Like if you take the example of, I think it was Tesco's or Sainsbury's in the UK, which would take all imports to one northern warehouse and then ship it all the way down to the south as well as the rest of the country. And they changed that. They've got different hubs now, so they're closer to their final destination. More very smaller, but I'm talking about international freight. Oh, there's background noise somewhere. So, yes, I think that knowledge sharing and making sure that these businesses that do need to transition have the knowledge they need in order to do it and the support that they need, whether that's from government or a government agency or a chamber of commerce, they need that support.
Okay, thank you. Well, excellent advice there on all fronts. Great opportunities to be thinking about as business leaders. Great opportunities as well, like Vanya said, for our business leading communities, such as our chambers of commerce. So hopefully lots of great tangible advice that we can take out of this conversation. And of course, a huge conversation. So one that I hope we'll have the opportunity to come back to on the boardroom. I know that some of our viewers will have more questions. So if you do, I encourage you to send them in. We will pass them on to our experts and hopefully get answers for you as we take this conversation forward. Vanya, Antoine and Marie, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your incredible expertise and your advice. Very inspirational. And like I say, hope to have you on the show again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to all of you, as always, watching us at home or at the office, thank you for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Boardroom.
Thank you very much.